Producers in music have this auteur-sage role that lacks a direct correlate in other art. Outside of manufactured pop, they're less absolutely responsible than a film director, way more legitimate than a film producer, more involved than a book editor, and more hands-on than a video game director. Maybe film director is the closest if it's a film that's written by its cast, who collectively decided, for our next piece, we'll live with this guru for a while. Their input is easy to overrate and to underrate because of the vast range in handsiness, with even hands-offness sometimes being a signature. The format of ranking the albums rarely has time to credit them, and I consider that generally apt, but I can also pause and acknowledge. A music career full of working with different producers can be one of strict variety, but it doesn't have to be. It's a particularly male-dominated industry among male-dominated industries. I guess with rock music plus hermit authorship, the very high percentage of men in each just cements itself. In some regards, the job is just being the guy who knows his way around the machines, so the musicians don't have to. And that's risen from essential in the taping tape together era to superfluous among bedroom pop, where the role is absorbed by the composer almost through necessity. Culturally, we're almost entering post-production. There was more experimental hard panning production in the 60s at the dawn of stereo, and that sound retained some advantages with a sense of audio space and every track clearly audible, but it's so weird in headphones. Mono to stereo feels like the biggest leap that production has made. There are those 5.1 mixes, but I'm yet to notice their benefit as I have 3.1 too few ears. I've recently gotten into the online AI that can create instrumental versions of tracks because it's hella useful for my parody song snippets, mashups, whatever, and it's just deeply impressive technology. I pledge my musical servitude to the Audio Basilisk. It's not mind-blowing that it can listen to things and discern each layer, but the clarity of the output can be. This technology brings us much closer to accessing isolated audio layers, which producers often keep under wraps until they can remaster and resell it 20 years later. It feels like it's just an industry quirk at this point that labels don't manage their own karaoke tracks, and the industry of in the style of replication remains at large because they already had the right fingers in the right pies, if you'll excuse such a filthy metaphor. Filthy! The 80s famously had some very naff sounds, and the naffness falls heavily on those who don't belong to the 80s, who aged into it and ended up losing their live drummer for a flimsy machine or a jump scare snare, gaining the hokiest synths. It just lined up so aptly with a very capitalist, garish and shallow era. I did not have fun in the 80s. There's still great music from then, despite the decade's sound. Some alongside its sound, and maybe even a few avoiding the sound. Decades are only cultural definitions, and it might actually be 1981 to 1990 that that's true for. But if you think about it, there wasn't a year zero, so that's the true 80s. I see the criticism overproduced a bit, and it lines up with some of the things I like because they've been made to sound complete in a studio. I'm not going to defend it in the abstract because overproduction definitely does happen. And the more bare bones producers, if you can even call them producers, recordists, can bring an awesome sound via their refusal to overproduce. Leave it to Albini, but some records come out too simple and thin, and some come out too buttery. Maybe the latter is seen as more of a sin as the offences come from beyond the instrumentalists, but sometimes it's just the sound of the studio giving a shit. Material being written in the studio affects its qualities and maybe its quality. It feels like an inferior approach, but it may still be one to dabble in. In less dignified moments of this series, I've mentioned auto-tune, a kind of brand name we maybe misuse as the generic for pitch correction, but I'm fine using it rather than explaining what pitch correction is every time. Maybe I'm only pedantic about things I respect. I'll explain it this one time. Pitch correction is auto-tune. Cher's Believe is cool. T-Pain can sing well but chooses to sound horrible. His loss is our loss. I bet there's loads of things that pitch correct without me finding it irksome or even noticing. I've toyed with moments of that kind of editing, let's call it vocal post-production, for creatively justifiable reasons. It's just when it's slathered atop a vocal track to replace it with fakery, unless it's some kind of cogent comment about doing that. Maybe some vocalists sound horrible without the tuning, and maybe they shouldn't be vocalists. I cringe at uniform auto-tune, hopefully not out of some kind of conservatism, but just hearing the dishonesty of it. But not everyone seems to register it. To me, the glaring moments are when a vocal line seems to move in absolute and strict steps of the 12-note scale, or the key that the piece is in. I think some voices might arguably do this naturally, or at least it's how they were taught to sing. It's arguably the correct way to sing. So in one context, I'm just describing accurate Western singing, and for someone with absolute pitch, maybe I'm very slidey and vibrato. Maybe there's some envy to my perspective, but it's not an envy of machines. Fuck them. It can be difficult to be certain that something's auto-tuned, sometimes because I want to trust the performer or the producer more, that they wouldn't sell as such artifice. I think if you're going to pay so for your vocalist with a strict melody, it starts to sound more like a keyboard line than an honest voice. I end up checking the credits for the vocal keyboardist. I sincerely hope that these producers have kept the unprocessed tracks so that the later remaster can be made without it. I consider it the 80s drum machine sound of the age, but one that's lasted way over a decade and kinda only exacerbated since. It's something we'll look back on with embarrassment because we currently look directly at it with embarrassment. It can be most annoying when the vocalist truly has good pitch control, because that's disguised underneath the artifice. Please just trust your performer. I don't know what you think you're cleaning out of them. If anything, you're cleaning themselves out of them. And if they're off, they could try another take. Auto-tune doesn't reflect a real singer. More controversially, I generally object to vocal reverb. It just sounds so plasticky to me. It's largely preferred. I've tried to kowtow to it a bit on my own tracks, and basically every time found that it just sounds wrong with me. If I've got vocal reverb on a finished track, reverb not delay, I'm probably still unsure of it and it still makes me cringe. I don't get what soaking my voice would add. I think things sound correct dry and the listener can ensure to get enough hydration themselves. Then there's mastering, music's kind of post-production. I say my music is no gods, no mastering, as an excuse for my deeply clumsy ways. I turn each part up until it sounds right and forget the drums are buried or something. I don't have others' input on my music. I barely have their attention as listeners. I make my music sound right-ish on the headphones I use, then render it and hope I don't notice something I want to change and blame anything else on using the wrong speakers. I believe proper mastering makes things work on basically all speakers, and maybe I'd have learned this skill if my university course offered what it promised. Have you ever noticed a remaster to be a severe improvement? I think I'm not enough of an audiophile to specifically care. Being of the CD era means I'm only beholden to digital CD masters, missing out on a whole vinyl world. I highlighted one remaster in my Distillers video, but even then it felt not like a perfected version, but a nudged version. I am, of course, a child of the loudness war, a mastering nightmare from the OUIs that we should regard with disgust. And I get it, but I also somewhat get the visceral excitement of something hitting so hard. I think I end up brickwalling my mixes because of that turn it up to compete philosophy, and yet I feel my tracks still come out quieter than most other MP3s I have. I'm lost in naivety a bit there through working on this alone, and maybe it contributes to some distinctive charm, or maybe it's a distinctive flaw. Producers, then, they exist at that level of creative input somewhere between equal partner and invisible facilitator, and I won't fully understand it until I can afford one.